right. Welcome to the show, everybody. Today we have a special guest. We have Dr. Sukumar from OSG. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sukumar.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, I'm happy that you came onto the show on the Above the Clouds podcast. We always have our first question is always refers to birds. So if OSG were a bird, Dr. Sukumar, what kind of bird would it be?
Well, that's a great question. I'd love to be a combination bird if there is such a thing as a combination bird, and certainly would like to combine between being a peacock and an eagle. I'm not sure if you ever had anyone be a combination bird, but let me explain to you why I think a combination makes sense, right? So as we talk a little later, I'll tell you more about what we do. But if you think about the peacock with its feathers and 100 dots, for us, those dots reflect humans and what people want. And therefore, what we do is all about thinking about what consumers and customers want. And then what we do is to help companies soar like the eagle. So the eagle has a lot of foresight. It thinks about the future. It thinks about where to go next. And so if I think about, who we are as a company, we really are a combination of those two things. We're very customer centric, just like the dots in a peacock. And we like to help our customers be confident, firm, have that foresight, and be able to soar into that growth, into that future, just like the eagle does.
I like it. That's a really good one. Nobody said peacock yet, and those are really cool birds. There's one, I saw one the other day. Our office backs up to this wooded space along Buffalo Bayou, and there are a lot of wild peacocks back there, and you can hear them, and they sound like dinosaurs. They sound crazy back there. But one was walking across the street the other day, and I don't think people realize how big those birds are. They're pretty big.
They're pretty big, and they're beautiful when when the weather is one of those where they actually pull out their feathers and display them in its entirety. I think those colors, it's just kind of reflection of how we as people are so very different, and the need to understand us is kind of so critical.
Yeah, that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about OSG for the people who don't know about you guys.
No, absolutely. So look, there are three letters here: the letter O, the letter S, and the letter G. As a legal name, we go by Optimal Strategics Group, but the three letters mean something. The first letter O is all about identifying opportunities. The second letter S is all about designing strategies. And the third letter G is about delivering growth. So when you talk about what we do as a company, we live in a world today with a lot of data. A lot of that data is historical, it's about the past. And what we are looking to do is combine that data from the past with what consumers, customers, patients, people want in the future, so as to help identify new opportunities, new innovations, new opportunities, new products, new solutions for our customers. And with that human being in mind, and with that data, loads of data that we all collect and leverage so much of automation and digital infrastructures, is to help design the right strategy to ultimately drive engagement. And customer engagement is so critical to drive growth. And in hindsight, that word letter G is also about human engagement or patient engagement. And when we do work in the healthcare environment, we know that we need more patient engagement. We need people engaged in their care, people engaged in what they're trying to manage to have a better life. And as a result of that, they grow. And as a result of that, they come out of the challenges that they face. So the three letters mean a lot. And for us, those three letters become the guiding principles of what we do as a company.
Wow, that's excellent. I think you touched on a couple of things there, because I do think sometimes it's about a lot of our clients in the marketing world or in the sales consulting world. They're always looking for growth, but that engagement is also super important, especially in the life sciences where you spend a lot of your time.
Absolutely. The only way you can drive engagement is by getting to know what your customers want, getting
Hmm.
to know what matters to them. And so we offer certain infrastructures and technologies that are unique about understanding what are customers' expectations, what are people's needs, and how do you begin to address them? And I think while today's world we live in artificial intelligence and speed and automation, which is great in terms of leveraging all that historical data. But if you think about trying to understand what matters to your customers, your humans, I think you need this unique technology that begins to learn about that into the future.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure. And that technology you're talking about, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the technology is called ACE map, and I'll spell the letters. It's A like apple, S like Sam, E like elephant, M like Mary, A like apple, and P like Peter. The letters map reflect multi-attribute preference, and the first three letters, ACE, reflect adaptive self-explication. So the idea here is that you could feed this algorithm a large number of things that are potential solutions to what customers might want in the future. And through this adaptive algorithm, we collect data individually on one individual at a time, one customer at a time, to understand what would they prefer and what would that hierarchy of preference be across many things that you might be able to bring to the market. So AceMap's a very powerful algorithm that begins to help us understand what drives people's choices, what drives their future behavior, and how do you begin to leverage them to look at the market as a collection of these individuals for who you're trying to address or solve certain things that matter to them, and how do you bring these new opportunities to the market?
Man, that is I think, such an important thing to do. I think people make a lot of assumptions about what their customers want. We see it all the time here. And, people get product feedback from the salespeople, and customers say this and they say that, and ask for this and want you to develop this further. But they're not always willing to pay you for that stuff. I think that's where, I think we've done some conjoint analysis in the past with clients, and it really helps to put that "what are you willing to pay for it" overlay on top of it. Because if you don't, then they'll ask for all kinds of things, but it costs money to develop that stuff.
Absolutely. And Richard, you know this, you mentioned the word conjoint, and you know that that is a methodology or a technology that is a combination of two words, consider jointly. And the idea that we as individuals, when we make choices, we consider many things together and we make trade-offs. You just described one trade-off, which is, well, I want all of these things, but I can't pay for them. So I got to balance it between what I get and what I'm willing to pay. And so AceMap is a technique that's a trade-off analysis technique that is kind of on steroids, because what it does do is it allows us to look at a space consisting of many, many different potential value drivers or benefits that you can bring to market, and you want to trade it off against whether people are willing to pay for it. And by the way, I know we talk about price and money as willing to pay, but in a world where we are poor for time and we are bombarded with so many different new technologies, that trade-off is not only about money, it's also about time, it's also about the effort, it's also about the learning that one has to put in into something new, and whether I'm willing to spend that, whether I'm willing to do that. So a powerful need there is a technology that can do this with many more of these dimensions, can do it
Mm.
faster, can do it individually. So it's not a collective algorithm, but one that actually can reflect the differences between Richard and Sukumar or Cindy. And so you really need that to be something that is very individual and captures what each one of us is expecting or what matters to each one of us in the future.
Yeah, that is so true. Especially, we work with a lot of B2B clients, and there's always a buying committee, and many times they're at odds with each other on what they want to achieve, or what their expectations are for a service or a product. And we really see it a ton with conjoint really helped us get through that with them, because what a driller might be interested in is maybe very different from what a geologist is interested in, or versus a asset manager or whoever we were talking to when we did those types of analysis. And it was really helpful to see that, and by company, by geography, and you realize there's no one value proposition that works for everybody in a buying committee. And, being able to educate the salespeople that are going in to talk to them is so valuable, because you could really be barking up the wrong tree, because, if you go in there and tell a driller the same thing that you would think that made the geologist happy, you might get choked to death.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. And Richard, I think you gave a great example because if you think about drilling companies, what you just described is a few things. One, there's a buying committee. Two, there aren't, thousands of or millions of like the way the consumers are. So you need a technology that works for a small, finite number of individuals or customers trying to understand what is driving their behaviors. But then more importantly, you describe something, there's potentially an instrument, a physical product, but there is also software that drives that product. There are some support and services that may be important. And if you took a geologist, maybe what they really care about in some instances might be the data and the analytics that come out of it, because they're trying to forecast and they're trying to really look at the quality of the data and whether that data can be taken across different platforms and done with a variety of things. So as you begin to think about where are those unmet needs, what is it that matters to each one of these different stakeholders, the things that I mentioned earlier on, I really need to understand each one of those people on that purchasing committee individually and separately to recognize that if I just took an average, I might be in a position where I'm not satisfying anybody. As someone said, the traditional conjoint models, they come back and they put together the guy who wants a hot tea and the guy who wants cold tea, and comes back and says, it's lukewarm tea that the market wants. Now, the market spits at lukewarm tea because either you really want, if you're down in the south, you really want some cold tea, or if you're up here north, you're thinking about really hot tea. So we truly need to understand what matters to each one of those individuals so we don't make the mistake of the law of averages and putting together something that nobody really cares about.
Yeah. Yeah. The laws of averages work great for textbooks, but not in the real world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your team there. How big is your team over at OSG?
Yeah, so we work across industries, as I just mentioned. So healthcare is a big space with both pharmaceuticals, medical device companies, but we also do work in consumer packaged goods. We do work at retail customers. So there's a diverse set of people that is also required on our team. We need people who have knowledge of the domain. We need people who are technologists who know how to handle data, because while we collect and bring data, we also look at historical data and need to have a data strategy as to how we bring all of this together in order to solve the business problems and in order to help address the problems around growth. So we have people who are really good at data strategy, at looking at data across different warehouses and technology platforms. And then we need people who are good in the use of AI, particularly agentic AI, when you're trying to predict, but you're trying to predict with data that is more relevant, more year as against just historical data. So you kind of put all of these things together. So we need a very diverse set of individuals, including people who are project managers or program managers. So we are a pretty decent sized company with about 75 plus individuals who have a good understanding of different domains, different businesses, different business challenges, but also people who are continuously learning about new technologies. We also work a lot with partners who are willing to bring us the talent. Think of it as just in time talent. As our customers have needs in marketing or marketing technologies, these partners are willing to bring us talent that we can use and leverage as we go along. The key thing, Richard, is we also work across geographies. It's not just US. We've done work in over 60 countries, believe it or not.
Wow.
And one of the powerful things about AceMap is that because you're looking at how people make trade-offs as against asking them a question on a scale from 1 to 5, you remove any cultural biases and you really understand what motivates people to make the choices they make. If you were to ask questions on a scale from 1 to 5, you very well know there are amongst us individuals who culturally want to be very nice and will give you all fives, and there are others who are very particular and strict in the grading scale, may only start at a 4. How do I compare these individuals? How do I bring all of that data, which kind of gives you signals that are more noise? But with ACE map and what we do there, we really get to those cultural differences and bring more a deeper understanding for what matters to individuals across different geographies, different cultures, different languages, and so on.
Wow, that's such a good point because you're right there. The way people score things, the way all those things can be really different. I got in trouble with people in my company because I would never give any meeting. We rate our meetings after we finish a meeting. I never gave anything a 10. And they were like, "You are too hard of a grader. The highest you've ever given us is an 8." And I'm like, "Well, nothing's perfect." And that's just the way I think about things. But yeah, other people, that are like 10. But I know they talked me into it. I'm soft now. I give them 10s
No,
if
but
it's good.
I think the more critical question to ask over there, Richard, is you gave them an 8. But was there a diagnosis around what would have made it a 10? What was the gap in there, and how do I diagnose that? So,
Yeah,
lots of companies do customer experience measurement, as you know. You get off a
sure.
plane, you get off staying in a hotel, and you get a one question in the email or text that says, rate us on a scale from 1 to 5 as to how likely would you be to recommend. Is it a 1 or a 5, or how satisfied are you on a scale from 1 to 5? But just step back and think about it. Sometimes that data is lots of noise because it never really told you. If I gave you a 4, why did I give you a 4? Did I give you a 4
Mm-hmm.
because of X or Y or Z? I mean, it's very, very hard to get people to tell you that what were they expecting when they came into the service, the airline or the hotel, and why was their experience a little short of what they really gained? And I think that's a very critical. I mean, you make a very good point, but I think the real question becomes: can I get more diagnosis? Can I actually fix the gap between your 8 and 10, and what would it take to do that?
That is the perfect follow-up question. I've always felt that way about net promoter score. Okay, you rated me on a scale of, 1 to 10, how likely you are to recommend me to somebody. You gave me an 8. I don't know what to do with that data. I don't know what to do with that. We have a bunch of 8s and there was one mad customer who gave us a 4. I don't know. I don't know. Like, what are we supposed to do with that other than track it over time? And I think something that's a little more diagnostic would be a lot more useful.
Absolutely, and I think that's a classic example of when individuals who gave it an 8 fall into passives because only 9 and 10 are advocates, right?
Yeah.
And so you get your scores start to wobble quite a bit, even over time, depending on who is responding to it or who's not. I think that score's been misused. The net promoter score has been misunderstood or misused. I'd use both of those words quite extensively. And I think if you really go back and read Fred Reichel's book when he wrote that, his whole thing was that what you really need to do is to go down deeper and understand what were customers expecting. You got to segment your customers to understand what they were expecting and where the gaps are. Score was really meant to be more of a high level indicator, but not necessarily one where we've started to use it as a currency, but the reality is that it should largely be one that tells you that you need to understand better what your customers are expecting.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Because the expectation, if they give you an 8, but their expectation is that, yeah, 8's great. I think I like them. That's the kind of company I want to work with. But then your marketing people are going, hey, we have all these passive people. Nobody loves us. You can really react to that data in the wrong way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Walk us through your career because it's interesting that where you are. I think when you were probably a little boy, you didn't think that you were gonna, growing up, you didn't think you would be getting into this voice of customer and data world. How'd you wind up here?
Not at all. I mean, I got to tell you, when I was a little kid, I grew up in a big city called Mumbai in India.
Huh?
And at that time, my parents told me I either had to become an engineer or I had to become a medical doctor. And of course,
Yeah.
what happened is, yes, I became a mechanical engineer and got my degree in mechanical engineering as a young undergraduate, and then came to America to. I was very keen on thinking about products and how to develop products. And I came to America to get a degree in marketing, but really started initially in operations research, and then finally ended up with a PhD in marketing and in analytics. And this is many years ago now. I started my career as an academic. So I was a young assistant professor at the age of 25, and believe it or not, Richard, exactly where you are in Houston, at the University of Houston, and then at Rice. So I started my career as a marketing professor teaching in the undergraduate and graduate schools there, and then spent more time in academia until one fine day I decided I would leave academia to help bring some of the things that we teach and we develop in academia to the corporate world, to help shape how people think about customers, consumers, whether it's B2B or B2C. And that's kind of how I transitioned from being an academic for 15 years to being a practitioner, and founded OSG as a company that started working a lot with, helping understand what physicians wanted and what patients wanted in new treatments and how to bring those to market.
What a ride, huh? That's so interesting. How'd you make that transition from academia to the commercial world?
Gosh, I think that's an interesting question you ask. As I was in academia, I loved it. I loved teaching. I loved being able to shape young minds while teaching in Houston, Texas. Many of the oil executives were folks in my executive MBA class, and I had a ball. I decided at one point that teaching was great, that I could continue teaching if I were to start working directly with corporations, helping shape, as a change management sometimes, because
Mm.
many folks who lead senior positions are often driven by their gut, which is not a bad thing. But sometimes, as you know, quite often these days, decisions made from the gut are without a lack of evidence or without a lack of strong data leads to, facing a lot of risk in how you drive growth. So it became one of those where if I could teach as well as bring solutions that were data driven, I could have the best of both worlds. I could create a change management inside these large corporations, while at the same time being able to demonstrate strong customer insights and evidence that would get executives to make the right decisions, the right choices, de-risk making a bad decision. And I think that's kind of what got me excited as I transitioned from out of academia into starting a business of my own.
Yeah, that is. I think that's so. You touched on so many things there that I couldn't agree more with. I think that the ability to use data to make better decisions that are going to be less risky is just critical to everything. And you're right. I think when you go with your gut, it's a 50-50 shot.
That's right.
And everybody thinks that their gut's a little better than everybody else's, but statistically, it doesn't bear out. People uh, people that seem like they're right all the time, they make just as many wrong decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, placing those right bets though in business is so important. And then you went out to start your own company, and that is when you're making all kinds of bets, right? On a daily basis, you're making bets, and you really want to make the bets that are going to pay off, and
Absolutely.
base it off data.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only problem with being a small business person is you don't always have the data.
True, true, but there have been times when we've actually collected, and I'd say I drank my own Kool-Aid. I would go out to our customers and ask them, what are they looking for when it comes to things like, customer insights, analytics. And like the example you gave before, we often have multiple decision makers who ultimately decide not only who to choose as a vendor partner, but also how to use the information and insights that we bring to the market, our customers. So it's very critical for us to understand all the different stakeholders. And literally, as part of that change management, Richard, is very critical to understand what's in it for each one of them. What are the expectations? How are they going to use it? Whether that be someone in marketing, the use of the insights and the analytics and the technology we bring in is different for someone in marketing than it is for someone in sales. And it becomes very important to ensure that they trust and believe, and they're willing to leverage that data and insights to make the right choices that they have to make.
That is such a good point because you mentioned sales and marketing. But I think one area that that I would love to see technology like AceMap be used more widely is in the R&D section of a company, because I feel like there's so many insights. I feel like a lot of our clients. I don't know if this is true in the world you work with, because I think especially pharmaceutical world, it's so expensive to develop any kind of drugs. But a lot of our clients, they're very engineering led companies, and they love to develop technology, and they have built these roadmaps of technology in their mind of what they are trying to achieve. And so many times they have not asked the customer recently, do you really want to do this, and are you going to reward us and pay a premium for this if we develop it? And they make things, and maybe they engineer 10 features on a new offering, and it takes, I don't know, 5 years, $20 million, whatever, to engineer all that stuff and build it out. And then they turn around and find out that the customer only wanted two of those features, and they were maybe not willing to pay as much as we were hoping to capture in the marketing and sales. It becomes this marketing and sales problem at that point instead of a product problem. But I think those things can be solved so much earlier and save companies so much money and trouble if they knew what they were developing right off the bat.
You're so right. You're absolutely right. And it's across industries. Today we work in the medical technology industry. It's got people just like what you mentioned, engineers. And medical technology has become so complex that there's so much of data that is being collected, and there are so many different machines. And so development of that kind of technology and software requires some really, really smart engineers. But like you mentioned, these engineers already have a presupposition of what they think the right product should be, or what that target product profile or optimal product should be, or minimum viable product should be. And quite often when they go to the market and try to assess what do customers really want, they're often surprised sometimes that what they thought was an attractive solution, that only certain elements are appreciated, certain other elements are not cared for. It becomes a good exercise. It's a good tension to have, but as a result of that, it helps you prioritize what the development roadmap should be. So, when you think about why do products fail, that's one of the areas to keep in mind, is that when you develop something that the customer really doesn't care about or is not willing to pay, then that's definitely one of the reasons why you didn't have the insights, or you didn't create the differentiation that really mattered to those customers. And they're not ready to go for it. So it's very critical for us to think about it in that fashion.
Yeah, we one of my good friends, he gave me a term that I use all the time now. He said, "Is this a is this a is this just a regular problem, or is this a bleeding from the neck problem?" Because if this is a bleeding from the neck problem, customers are going to pay for that, and they're going to want it fixed right away. If it's just a regular problem, everybody's got problems, and they'll maybe fix it one day. But if you're not solving the bleeding from a neck problem and then talking about it in your sales and marketing, you're not gonna see that, you're not gonna see the growth that you're probably looking for. It's a nice
Absolutely.
to have. We'll look at it next quarter, which means never.
Yeah. Yeah. And depending on which customer you call, you get a lot of anecdotal evidence. If you call in the customer that is complaining all the time, then you're going to get a lot of reasons for why they don't want you, and you feel like solving all of those problems are important. But the reality is, it's anecdotal, it's one off. And is that sizable enough for a company to invest and design, develop, and launch a new solution? Is a question one has to ask.
Yeah, the 100%. I think, I think data is one of those interesting things that all data is a snap point, one point in time, right? A little snapshot. Because, and if you're only talking to a handful of people and you talk to one person and he's having a bad day and he tells you all the things he hates about everything you do, then you could be beginning a little skewed data with that.
Absolutely.
How do you guys get around that with your technology with AceMap?
Well, we clearly start with trying to understand all the possible problems. So, there was a methodology called jobs, outcomes, and constraints. So the whole idea here is that gather all those anecdotal issues that the engineers think are an issue, and you kind of bring in to pull that in. So we might do some workshops internally with the engineers trying to understand better what are all the challenges they feel their customers face. And then we go out to the customers and we begin to observe them. We begin to observe what is their journey, what jobs are they trying to do, what outcomes are they seeking, and what constraints do they face with the existing solutions. Are they in a situation where certain things are not working for them? Why is it not working? Do they have a workaround? And with all of that sort of qualitative understanding, we begin to take that and transition it into a more definitive description of a benefit that might come up from solving that challenge or that problem, of being able to address that job that person's got to do that they cannot do with the existing solutions that they have. That kind of collective, at that point, we begin to generate a good solid list of sometimes even as many as 50 or 75 various needs and benefit statements, which we can then go out and take a larger sample, a larger group of customers, could be as many as little as 20 or 25. And depending on markets where we can get, like let's say if you're dealing with a medical device, you might be able to get lab technicians, in the hundreds. Or if it
Mm,
happens to be a pharmaceutical new medication, you could get physicians in the hundreds. So depending on the area, we need only as little as 25, but we can go as much as you want because this whole technology works one individual at a time, one customer at a time. We are then able to leverage AceMap to come up and understand what that hierarchy is in terms of those needs that have to be addressed, and are they big enough that they see it being unmet. And so think of it as being looking at, will it drive my choice of a new product
mm.
versus how big a problem is it that I need it to be addressed now, the unmet, the bleeding example that you gave. That begins to shape up for us things that we call as potential differentiators. There may be other things that are important. I mean, you need tires on a wheel, you're looking for low miles per gallon, but you feel like it's not really an unmet need because others have solved it. That becomes a table stake. That becomes a cost of entry. That means you got to have it, but just because you had it is not going to be a solution that people are going to buy. So we begin to understand, those sort of areas of differentiation today, the ways to shape the market in the future, to educate them. If there are problems that might be relatively, it's unmet, but not everybody cares about it, how do I begin to shape the market for the future? How do I begin to think about innovations? So, no idea is a bad idea. So if you're an engineer, you bring an idea, it's not a bad idea. It's just that it may not be a big enough problem today that your customers are running out of the door to find a solution. So if you can assess that, then you can prioritize that as a market shaping opportunity rather than one that a solution coming out of the market in the short term is going to bring you revenue. So you start to leverage that kind of data to shape what that roadmap should look like. where you should prioritize, where you should invest today, and where you might have to invest only after you've shaped the market about the need.
I really love that approach. I think it does a few things when you think about it. I think there's so much bias. I think a lot of times because the engineers that you're talking about, they were told, "Hey, we want to make a new product or we want to advance this product and we need you to go and engineer these X features." And they do, right? And they haven't thought about what is the job that people are looking to do. And how many times have you seen a product go into market and everyone thought that they knew the value that the customer was going to get out of it. And then the customer finds a whole new value sets on their own that the engineers never stopped to consider. But if they would have known that that was the ultimate value, it would have made product market fit so much easier. But they didn't think to ask those questions if they don't use the approach like you just were describing to us.
Absolutely. And I think that the tool brings a little bit of discipline. It brings the ability to actually put many things into it in order to understand what matters to individuals. And most importantly, it avoids that lukewarm T problem, which is you ask on a scale from 1 to 5 and everybody gives fours and fives and you think that a 4.5 is a better rating than a 3.5. It just happens to be that the 3.5 might have been something that a smaller group of people really cared about, and a solution for that particular dimension that got a 3.5 might have won you more business
Yeah.
than trying to go after the lukewarm 4.5, which didn't solve anybody's.
Yeah. Or it's already something that your competitors have solved before. And now it's table stakes, just like you were describing. We see that a ton with our clients. They really want to talk about these something that maybe they're matching a competitor. Now they really want to talk about it, but it costs money to do marketing, and you don't want to spend money on talking about things that are the don't differentiate you from your competitors at all.
Right.
What's one thing you know now in your role that you wish you had known from day one?
Well, I think the uh, the whole topic around the fact that it's what we do is a combination of both technology as well as people service. So you're not only selling data and technology, but you're also selling domain expertise. So you need a combination of those two things in order to win. It's important for us to have good critical data, unbiased data, data that everybody can align on. It's like a data orb, if you want to call it that, that everybody says, well, I believe in, and this is something that's going to change the way we think about the market. That's something we do very well. But we also need in our business, and I think AI is not going to be able to replace that. It's just people who know the industry well. So, Richard, you know
Mm,
this, oil and gas, even the exploration and production is a highly sophisticated industry. And so you need people who really know everything about that industry and able to bring credibility and able to bring, get the data to speak for itself while also being able to bring that credibility to those customers. And I think, that combination is very critical in our business. I also think that in what we do, good quality data is very important. So, there's a lot of data, as you know, there's a lot of data in healthcare. There's also a lot of data in oil and gas. There's a lot of data in, pick an industry, consumer packaged goods. We talk about big data, but I go back to the time in early 80s when the grocery business used to put out a lot of data. Every SKU in the grocery store. You got a 65,000 square feet store that has over 100,000 SKUs. And every time somebody buys that, there's data in there. So big data existed for a long time. But the questions that we all have to ask ourselves is that data of good quality? Are we able to use it correctly? And how do you bring all of that together? I think it's a combination of things that are critical for the success of OSG, but also critical for helping bring success to our customers in terms of what they have to do. So hopefully, I made some sense here in terms of what you need. You need good people, you need good data, you need the ability to actually bring all of that data together in order for it to be one that can help solve the problems that our customers face.
No, I think I agree completely with you. I think that having the data is one thing, and no matter how good the data is, there's always a signal to noise ratio in there. And being able to interpret the signal from the noise, and then make sense of that, and then explain it to somebody in the context of their business where they may have actionable insights that they know exactly what to do. I've been exposed in a situation where there's too much data and no one there to interpret it properly, and then you're more confused than ever.
Absolutely.
Well, we could go this way or we could go. That was the same decision I was before I had all this data, and now I'm more confused than ever. What about from a sales and marketing perspective? Because I know you touch both of those worlds very heavily with your data. What's the biggest obstacle you face in your industry?
You know, the biggest obstacle that I face today, if you put it into perspective, the last 3 to 4 years have seen a skyrocketing of the use of new technologies, artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, particularly, and now more and more we talk about not only generative AI, but also agentic AI and, digital experts and bots doing everybody's job. And it has become everyone's feeling that these bots will begin to do everybody's jobs. And but these bots and these AI agents are only as good as the data that they sit on. And so the traditional thinking is that there is so much of data out there. Why not just use them and use artificial intelligence to answer your questions and to bring insights? And I think the problem is, how do you educate your customers that those bots are available, those AI tools are available to you and to your competitors? And most importantly, they sit on a shallow data stack of things that were from the past and are not as yet reflecting on what your customers may want in the future.
Hmm.
So how do you bring the future and the foresight of data into the now and year, which reflects all of the past? And how do you educate your customers that that is important? And you need to have something that is unique and competitive for you to be able to meet and beat your competitors. Because if everyone were to go to the same AI tools and were to be building, various marketing or sales engines on the basis of that, then it just becomes one of, it matures very fast. It kind of plateaus very quickly. Um, and there is no efficiency and there is no effectiveness in how you are able to win when everyone has the same information and the same tools. So I think, how do you educate your customers that bots are good? They bring speed, they bring some cost efficiencies, but they're only as good as the data that they sit on, and that it is kind of important for you to begin to think about that the data that it sits on is shallow, and the data that it sits on happens to be one that everybody has. Therefore, you really need to be thinking about how to disrupt the market by thinking differently. I don't know if I'm making sense there,
Um,
but yeah.
that makes so much sense, and we see it. We're seeing the same thing here, and it's. I think everyone can see it. If you just go look at your LinkedIn profile and your LinkedIn feed, how people are all using. So many people are using AI to write their posts, and it's just slop. It's just everyone sounds the same. They all are talking about the same thing. It just is an echo chamber, and I can tell a post written by a human, and I can tell one that was, somebody generated using ChatGPT. Even if you train it on your voice and all these other things, it's just very superficial. Like you said, it's not deep, and it just shows, and everything starts sounding alike, looking alike. And we were at a trade show for one of our clients, and I was walking around, and you could see so many of the graphics on the booths were done by AI too, and you're just like, man, everybody looks the same. What happened? At least, but I think the bar for low quality stuff has gone up, but now it's all low.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There was an oil executive in Houston who once we were having a chat about why do products fail, and we he started talking about. He says, Sukumar, I think there are three reasons for that, and I think it stands to the truth in time. He says the first thing is not having customer insights, and the second thing is not having a clear differentiation. Why you and how are you different? And then the third reason he said was the reason it fails is because of a lack of effort. And, in some worlds that you kind of think about lack of effort as being, do I throw more money at something? Do I spend more on sales and more on marketing? Do I buy the nth MarTech stack that exists out there and send out more emails and more blog posts and all those kinds of things? But the reality is that that effort is not only money, but that effort is also knowing that you're starting on the right customer and you're speaking to them to convert those behaviors. Because today we live in a world where, if 10 customers buy it, the hundreds after them will start to follow. And there's a lot of that pattern that is happening. So knowing that you started at the right end of the market and not at the wrong end is very critical. And that data in terms of helping you shape where to begin is also very critical. So we really have to think about new innovations, new products coming to market, as well as the existing growth from existing products, really being able to continue to reflect customer insights, knowing how to create that differentiation, knowing what that customer journey is and where do you interact with them. And then most importantly, who are those people that you begin with, and you're able to spend the right amount and very effectively so as to begin to deliver that growth engine. So I think that's the depth of data needed for that is far, far different than what you can get today in an LLM.
Oh, man, well said. And I think that kind of halfway answers my next question for you. But what is the biggest misconception that people have about your industry?
I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, which is that
Yeah,
AI is going to solve the whole problem, right? I mean, if you think about it, what is it? If there's one word that describes what we do, the outcome of what we do, it's improving engagement, customer engagement, patient engagement, human engagement, right? And we are talking about how to drive that sort of behavior change. And the feeling that AI is going to be that magic bullet
yeah,
is the misconception that exists out there. And how do you get people to think differently? I'll give you an example. In healthcare, there is a general feeling that you will have agentic AI nurses that will address all your health problems. But how does the agentic AI nurse work if that nurse is going to use data that is not necessarily all complete and all appropriate? And so if the data is weak, the agent's responses are not there, and you only need one instance of something going wrong, that could potentially create challenges.
sure.
That doesn't mean that those bots and agents are not valuable. They are valuable. There's many things that they can do to alleviate the pain of shortages in healthcare workers, just as I think they can alleviate even in other industries, whether that be engineering or technology, where they can alleviate some of the workforce shortages and they can create more efficiency. But it has to be used, and people have to be educated in terms of how to use it, where to use it, and how to use it in a manner that brings more, not just efficiency in cost and time, but also be more effective in driving the outcomes that a company is looking to drive. So that education is going to take some time.
Yeah, well said. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and a guy that was on there is an AI expert, and he was talking about just what you were talking about with, AI taking people's jobs. And he said it's definitely going to be disruptive in the job market. But he said the thing that AI, let's say anything is let's say starting a business or coming up with a product design, all these things, let's say it's a 10-step process. He said AI is not good at the first two steps, knowing what to build and why. That's a human skill that is, and some humans are good at it, some are not. But knowing what to build and why. But then the next three steps, 3 to 7, is probably pretty good at. Like, yeah, just generate this or write this line of code for this or help me do this better. All that step is probably good and increases the efficiency big time. But then the last two steps, it's not as good at anymore. Of like, now we have to bring it to market. We have to convince other people to do it. We have to do this change management that's going to take place. Well, that's where AI is going to really struggle for a really long time. And that's where humans can really do it. So if you think about every process like that, or those two initiating steps that are going to get things going, pointed in the right direction, align AI to help execute it quickly, but then you have to socialize it with the other humans to make it live. And I thought that was a really good breakdown of that.
No, absolutely. I think you're spot on that. And, because that front end of developing a new innovation, it's solving problems for people. It's
Yeah.
solving problems for humans. And therefore, you cannot do it without their involvement or their understanding of what matters to them. And then it's the same thing when you take it out back to the market. Where you can leverage AI is that in between step, and obviously even that requires some amount of monitoring, so it's doing it correctly. And the end game of bringing that innovation to market to the right customer at the right time at the right place still requires humans to oversee that.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about where you see your industry going over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think we're going to be inundated with more data. That's for sure. I think we are already inundated with complex data, structured, unstructured. We are going to see systems and technologies that can do this faster and cheaper. We are also going to see the creation of automation to address problems that are more of an execution nature, exactly like what you just described, um, to do them faster and cheaper. But the emphasis is soon going to come back to recognizing that data quality is important
Hmm.
and what is the type of knowledge and information you need needs to be strategized upfront before you go into the world of the digital experts and the automation. And therefore, I think we're going to start to see a migration from using LLMs to kind of building LLMs on more focused and deep knowledge,
Hmm.
deep data that reflects not only historical data, but also reflects on some of that foresight that we're talking about. How do I bring in what matters to customers? How do I bring in what matters to people and incorporate that along with that sort of, existing quote unquote knowledge gardens and applying them to very domain specific things. So I think we're going to see that sort of evolution, better use of data, better understanding of the data, and that the AI tools and the automation tools will now be structured more and more. Unique data that a corporation can believes they own differentiates them from their competition and therefore allows them to be more successful as they go forward. And I think that I'm seeing some degree of, executives who are beginning to think that way, shape themselves that way. I think that's going to be a lot more as we go forward. That's going to be a lot more pervasive. So there are certain routine things that they're most comfortable with, let it be automated, whether that be website marketing or website design and collateral design and so on. But I think they're going to come back to wanting things to be unique, as exactly what you said a little while earlier, which is about, you walk into a trade show and they all look very clearly designed by a very broad spectrum chat GPT. and Claude, and now we're going to soon come back to saying, no, I wanted to speak the language of my company. I wanted to speak what we bring out uniquely. I want it to reflect our brand book. I do not want it to be the same set of words and images that get pulled from a broad spectrum kind of LLM. And I think we're going to start to see a greater focus into that. Hope that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. How are you guys preparing for that at OSG?
I think it comes back to three things: making sure we have the right technology, making sure we are reflective of the right kind of data sources. Some of those data sources are historical. Some of those data sources, like what we bring and add to the model, are unique and differentiated for a customer. And then making sure that we have the talent on our team that have the domain expertise. So I think the three together will continue to shape speed. Will continue to speed to be able to deliver things more cost effectively, and then most importantly, continue to deliver solutions that are impactful, because that impact comes from knowing the customers of our customers, knowing what matters to them, and bringing that sort of forward thinking data into the knowledge pool,
Mm.
so that the AI and automation now is crafted more uniquely for a customer of ours rather than generically using LLMs.
I see that. I could see that being so much more powerful by bringing in that true data about what your actual customers are thinking and saying that they want. I think that is and what trade-offs they're willing to give to in order to receive that with the power of AI behind it to maybe extrapolate that or improve the efficiency of how you're going to deliver that message. I could see that being very powerful.
Yeah. And Richard, about 20 years ago, if you had said, use the word data, the only thing that went into people's heads was numbers. But today, when you say data, it's no longer just numbers. It's
Yeah.
voices, it's text, it's videos, it's graphics. I mean, it's embedded in all of that. It's not only what people said, but it's also the emotion with which they said it. What did they portray and how does that reflect? So you have to look at, when I said technology, it's just one word, but realistically, that technology is very complex now, much more complex because it can actually bring and synthesize all of these different kinds of data. I mean, imagine, 20 years ago, if you did an ethnography and you went out in the field to see how a geologist or, any one of those engineers did use the drill bits, you observed and walked away from there. But now you are actually recording that and making better sense of that data, besides looking at all the other numbers and everything that goes along
Yeah.
with it. So the word data, it means very different things today than what it meant to people 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, that AI can pick up on it is pretty amazing too. We use this tool called Fireflies to analyze our calls, and it detects accents as better or good as I can, and it even can tell if people are being sarcastic with their tone. Oh, I love it when that happens. Right? Wow.
Well,
Do you?
it's actually a better reader of how engaged someone is in the conversation. You sometimes you move and you're not reflecting on what the speaker is saying, or you're doing multitasking. I think it starts to
Sure.
flag some of those things very quickly these days. So yeah.
Humans are notoriously bad listeners. My wife will tell you that about me, that I'm a terrible listener.
My wife will tell you the same. If she ever gets on a Zoom call, I'll get a text message from her saying, "You're not focused. You're not listening." She just seems to like, no, she's my AI bot who kind of figures out that whether I'm engaged or not.
We're big picture guys, We're thinking about the next thing. We're thinking about something else.
Very
I
true.
love it.
Very true.
What about from a sales and marketing perspective? What tactics are you most excited about at OSG?
Uh, I think it's interesting you asked what tactics, right? I was looking at some reports recently that said most chief marketing officers use as much as, or as many as 7 different channels to communicate. And so if I focus on the word tactic, it just comes down to the fact that there are many more tactical ways to engage a customer, but not all of them are effective. And there is technology that can bring speed and low cost to any and many of them, right? So think about another statistic, which is that most consumer goods companies today spend as much as 80% of their marketing spend on digital medium. And when I say digital medium, it could be anything from emails to texting to, Google ad placements to, Instagram influencers and all that kind of stuff. But only generate about 30% of their sales
Hmm.
through e-commerce and digital means.
Wow.
So therefore, there is still a lot of waste in there. And I'll go back to the first two steps and the middle steps and the end steps. If you put these thoughts into place, I think you're seeing if someone's using 7 channels, they must be spending a lot more money across every one of those channels.
Yeah.
We have to study and understand the return on marketing investment from each one of those channels, whether it's B2B or B2C. You have to think about, are they well integrated? Are they well sequenced? Is a message hitting the same customer or consumer with the right kind of sequence so as to be able to generate the kind of effective outcome? And I think we need to bring more appropriate data, more unique data to our customers so that they can understand which channels they may abandon because it's not really you cannot you can really attribute and say that's not very effective for you. You need to change and move in a different direction. So what are we preparing for? I think we are preparing for continuing to educate our customers that you have many more tactics and tools at at your disposal. Don't jump to use all of them. They are all nice flashy tools. Let's go back to understanding what your matters to your customers. Let's go back to understanding how you might message to your customers and where in their journey and how would you target these messages with the right sequence, cross the right channels with the right frequency so as to convert. Let's actually really understand that and attribute the return on marketing investment more appropriately than what you're doing today. So I think there's some work there for us as well, tactically, both for our own business as well as for the businesses of our customers to help shape and start to reduce the many shiny tools that exist out there that people use but don't get the returns on it.
You really hit on a nerve there. I think there are so many, there's no shortage of tools and no shortage of channels out there. And every day there's more and more. And, knowing which one is appropriate for a client and for their customers to engage with their customers is not always easy. And what we've seen here is it changes, and it even changes for the same type of target audience. What worked great 6 months ago is not working as well anymore. It's just we operate in such dynamic markets these days, and everything is changing so fast, and competitors are responding and all these things. And some things that were very popular 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that people said, this is not as effective anymore, I'm going to give up on it. Now they're back. We have a client that we're helping him with a paid search campaign, and I didn't think it was going to be very effective, and I thought it was going to be expensive. And, it's kind of old hat to do paid search these days, with all the other fancy channels and things that you have. But it was awesome. And it was very low cost because none of their competitors were doing these. And the customers had a high intent for it. And they were at the bottom of the funnel and they were ready to buy. So it worked great. But I wouldn't have assumed it would have. It was kind of low on my tactics list. But that's where you have to let the data show you, because I think everybody has biases, and I had a bias against that channel because I didn't think it was going to do anything. The customer said otherwise, and they're the ones who matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're spot on. What's going to happen is a lot of these technologies, a lot of these different channels are going to kind of come under a single roof. So right now we see disparate tools, and there'll be a huge roll up, and they'll begin to come under a single infrastructure. There'll be
Hmm.
a lot of consolidation. And there has to be intelligent data that helps you decide which channel or which portion of that big house of tools makes most sense to use for which customer with what sequence and how often do you use it so you don't overload that, right? I mean, today, Richard, as you know, you could send one more extra email at no cost to somebody. But actually, there is a cost, and that cost is somebody getting very frustrated and throwing you on the unsubscribe list,
Yeah,
right? Because it's only a button away with all the regulations. It's only, click on the unsubscribe and get me off the list. And so
sure.
I think we got to be mindful of that the cost is not just the cost of technology or cost of another email or cost of another paid ad, that excessive bombardment of highball movements also leads to disillusionment and people kind of having a negative perception of your brand. And how do you kind of manage that? Super intelligence there in terms of being able to know what your customers really want and how to sequence it and how do you kind of personalize it is going to be very, very important.
I couldn't agree more. It's something I often reflect on is, I feel like people are already so inundated with advertising and these messages, and it's never been more than it is now. And I just think about with AI democratizing that and making it so much easier and so much more affordable to produce all these things. I just think it's going to be exponentially worse going forward and people are going to be so burned out. And I just wonder how that's going to affect the ability to reach consumers. They're already skeptical and burned out, and this is just going to dump more kerosene on the fire. So how are we all going to adapt to that? Because it's not if it's going to happen; it's when. And I think we already are there.
No, and so I think smart marketeers are probably going to realize this very quickly, and those who are there in that maturity curve, up there in the maturity curve, are going to quickly recognize that they may have all the tools and technologies at their hand, but the real solution is to find who cares about what tools are going to be most effective for every customer one at a time. I think back of the days when I first started in marketing, we didn't have any of these technologies. And when a colleague of mine began to talk about one-on-one marketing, I was in my head going, that ain't going to happen. How am I going to speak to one customer at a time, one-on-one? What do I have? I mean, we're talking this in the late 80s, early 90s, when what we know today didn't exist.
Yeah,
But now we know that there are tools that can speak to you individually. But if it doesn't do it, uh, our attention spans are becoming more and more limited. So if it doesn't do it smartly, and if it doesn't do it in a manner that is going to generate the right kind of engagement, I think we're going to have a backlash of a different kind where money spent is going to be money wasted rather than money spent is yielding the growth results that corporations are looking for.
yeah, it's one to watch for sure because it's. I could see this train headed down our path. Well, that's some good advice for marketers. What would you get? What's some advice you would give somebody just starting their career out in sales or marketing?
It's a great question, and I still get a lot of students having come out of academia. I still get a lot of students calling me every day about wanting to look for internships, or when I do speak occasionally back in the classroom. So that's a great question you ask, and I think for those in sales and marketing, there are two big pieces of advice that I would give anyone. One is always do your homework before you go in front of a customer. And then two, always be prepared to ask a lot of questions of your customer before you make the decisions you got to make or before you're trying to close a sale or whatever the case might be. If you're in sales, you're trying to close a sale. So it's very, very important that you do your homework and prepare a list of questions that you can ask your customers, because the more knowledgeable you are, the more likely you are to get sell, and the more knowledgeable you are, the more likely you are to pull down the barriers that a customer is you know, considering you or someone else for a deal or a sale. So let's not forget that the importance of asking good questions in helping remove the barriers to closing a deal.
That is very well said. I think about all the deals that I've tried to close, and I thought that I was, I had a good beat on this customer. I knew what their problem was, and I knew before I even walked in the room what their problem was going to be. And then I go and present a solution that was not right for them because I didn't ask enough questions in that process where I didn't misdiagnose the problem. And I think you just can't ask too many questions in those meetings for sure. Well, what is what have we not talked about that we should have talked about today?
No, I think you asked a lot of great questions, Richard. I think it was a fantastic conversation here. But I think I'd love to leave you and the listeners with a couple of important comments. One, we all know that artificial intelligence is here to stay in all the different forms. I think we all agree that artificial intelligence is driven by the data it recognizes and is able to put out there. So it's important that we step back a little bit to often ask ourselves the question: has the business problem changed? Because I don't think the problems that businesses face are any different now than what they were 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And so the real question becomes, am I using artificial intelligence on the right data and the right knowledge? And am I able to make the right decisions for our customers, our companies, and so on? And if not, what needs to happen? And I bring it back into the three things that are important ingredients. There is technology that brings speed. It helps reduce costs. There's data that goes into that technology that makes that technology smarter. So make sure that the data you have is not only one that captures the past, but also is reflective of what matters to customers in the future. And then there are people who, as you pointed out, the first two steps and the last steps are still domain specific. They're driven by people. They need people and knowledge. So I think I want to leave everyone with that thought, which is we need to make sure that we are reflective of using technology appropriately with the right kind of data and with the right kind of people and domain, that so that automation and speed can be combined with delivering effectiveness to our customers, to the very people that we work for, whether that be the end consumer or the patient or the physician or the geologist. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing in that fashion.
Very well said. Thanks for leaving us with that parting thought, Dr. Sukumar. Thank you for being on the show. How can people reach you if they want to get in touch?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation here today. So great conversation, great dialogue. They can reach me through my email, which is r. Sukumar, Sukumar, at osganalytics.com. So, like opportunities, S like strategies, G for growth, and the word analytics, analytics.com. So they can reach me on my email, and I'd love to have a conversation and a follow-up conversation with them.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and we'll talk until next time. We'll talk again.
Great. Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, sharing, or spreading the news about us on your favorite channel. Thank you for tuning into Above the Clouds, Stories from the Boardroom. Until next time, stay above the clouds.